Hello, welcome back. It's another Overwatch analysis video because I have no internet. So let's get cracking with it then, shall we? The Nexus Cup, I think it's called, or maybe it's just called the 2021 Nexus. Anyway, this tournament that's being running at the moment between these Overwatch League teams had a delightful little surprise in it this week because the Dallas Fuel were able to win a series against the Seoul Dynasty, no less. And I want to kind of run through what happened in this series because I didn't expect it. You guys didn't expect it because on Avril's stream, again, shout out to Avril, only 20% of people thought the Dallas Fuel would win this series. I would agree with them. So what happened here? Now, the first thing I want to point to is a changing compositions, right? Straight out of the gates, we've got our first map, first team fight on Gardens on Lijiang Tower, and we've got Fearless on Winston. My God, this guy is incredible on Winston. And I want you guys to notice the running narrative throughout this video, which is Fearless is Winston fucks, man. It just really does. A huge shout out as well to Jex's Lucio, which looks pretty spectacular. But the focus here that I want to put is on how Fearless's Winston makes everything else easier for them. So take a look at this first team fight as well. They just come straight out of the gates. They go really aggressive. Jex has got the speed boost. They're straight out there and they focus down Fitz and they take him out right at the beginning. And they're being really proactive. And this lack of coordination that was present during the Dallas Fuel, this is the next team fight as well, where they do the same kind of thing, just always taking the tempo forwards and aggressively, Fearless diving in, getting into their face, trying to punish the backline, see if they can get picks on Profit, that kind of thing, and get a lot of success out of being proactive. And in my opinion, Fearless's Winston really ties that together. Because they can all play around his engages and Jex's speed boost, it gives them all, they're all on the same page. It's not complex, it's an easy team composition. You've got the Moira Lucio, the Tracer, and the Sombra. Doha's clearly on a comfort pick, and it takes some of the responsibility away from Exy of having to make any solo plays. He never has to duel anybody. He never has to make his own space. He just goes in when team press speed boost and Winston jump. Zug, zug, zug. And it worked really well for them. Seoul really struggled to deal with this all-out aggression, and let's take a look at what happened on the second round here as well, because it's much of the same. They managed to find Seoul Dynasty where the supports are positioned in a poor position. A great boop comes out from Jexa. Jexa actually gets another one later on in the team fight as well, because the guy is a freak when it comes to the Lucio. And this is obviously a great look for Dallas. They found something within the span of a couple of days that they can really play to a much higher level than the ball, Zen Brig kind of compositions, which are a bit slower and pokier. And it's really successful for them. There's a couple of things, though. If we wind back to the previous map just for a moment and take a look at the team compositions that are actually being played, there's a couple of things that I want to point out, though. It's a great thing that Fearless is like in world's best contention on Winston. That is a great thing. It is also fantastic that Jex is having so much impact on Lucio, even when his team around him is good, because it can sometimes be easier to stand out on a bad team, but Jex's Lucio looked great here, even when they were winning against the Seoul Dynasty. My problem, potentially, is that I think this highlights my same concern that I had with the Dallas Fuel in my previous video, where I went through how they lost to the Dragons, which is there is a stark difference between Dallas in a bad meta or on a bad composition and Dallas on a meta that they're comfortable with. Comfort Hero for Fearless looks incredible. Comfort Hero for Jexa looks incredible. Exy not having to really do too much on his own looks really good within the team system. And then obviously Comfort Heroes for Doha and honestly Fielder as well. So the difference is key, and I think this is going to be a concerning narrative for Dallas Fuel fans as we go throughout the season. When Dallas fans metas they can play very well or can force themselves to play things that fit their style much more, damn, they're going to bang. They're going to be a really good team. When Dallas is forced to play things that aren't quite in their wheelhouse, for example, Fearless being on the Orisa or Fearless being on the ball perhaps, where he's not able to have the same carry level performances, and Exy having to play things that are a little outside of his wheelhouse, stuff like the Ashe maybe in taking head-to-head duels, or Tracer in a meta where you have to take a few more 1v1s, and when Jex is on things like the Brigida, which he is nowhere near as good at as he is on Lucio, even though he's serviceable, this team is going to look a little weaker. Another reason why this composition works so well as well is because Profit wasn't able to really do too much against the backlines, but we'll harp on that a little later when we get to map 5. As for now, let's go forward to Hanamura, actually, which was the second map in the series. Gesture comes in to replace Marvel, and we get this happening. which is a stonker of a time bank set by the Seoul Dynasty. 5 minutes on the clock. There was no way that the Dallas Fuel were even comparable. I mean, Seoul Dynasty thoroughly outplayed them when it came to that. Fuel were trying to run the same kind of strats that we had seen previously from them. They weren't running the Winston just hardcore dive because it's almost impossible when it comes to Hanamura. So instead, they planked. But what I do want to showcase, even though they lost this map, is that this composition that came out for them, which was essentially like a rush composition, and it plays somewhat similarly to their comp that they ran on Lijiang, where they've got the speed boost. It's all coordinated around when Jexa says, go, 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 and Fearless is right there at the front making space for them. And Fearless's Reinhardt doesn't get enough credit. It's a really, really good pick. It's not quite his Winston, but it's really good. And I think people kind of forget that sometimes. So take a look at how this goes. It's fairly simple. We've all seen this strategy before, but I just thought it was worth highlighting that the strengths here for the Dallas Fuel in the first half of this series were all around compositions that relied on Jex's speed boost coordinating the team and giving them ways of syncing up together. They don't have to play anything that's very positional. They don't have to play anything that's very much around like poking and prodding and playing the slow fights. It's zug zug Overwatch. Get in their face and roll them over. Pick a target and take them out. And it's working well for them. They don't quite get point B here. They don't extend it very much further. But it looks like they might have had a chance at some point, right? They've got the Coalescence. This could have been maybe not a comeback because their defense was so poor, but this is a decent look, and it continues the narrative thread, at least that I saw when I was watching the game, which was that Dallas looks so much better when they're able to actually play compositions that are around kind of rushing. And make no mistake, that Tracer Sombra kind of dive composition is not really a backline dive. You can play it like that, and they did, and it had success, but it's a lot of just going, you know? It doesn't have a lot of the complexity of some other dive compositions. It's just inting towards whatever target you can find and syncing it up with the speed boost and Fearless. So, okay, this was an alright look for them on Hanamura attack. It's a bit one-dimensional, but it is what it is. It gives us some ideas about the strengths and weaknesses of Dallas moving forwards onto the actual season itself. So let's move on now to King's Row, which is the clip that I've got lined up after this. And King's Row started very similarly to Hanamura, in that Dallas started on defense, tried to play the meta, which in this scenario was the ball kind of compositions, the ball and the tracer, and they planked. I mean, they didn't completely plank, but 1:29 on the clock for King's Row is still a very good time for the Dynasty to set. And when the Fuel were on attack, we actually saw something totally different that we hadn't seen at any point during the series so far, which is this double bubble mirror composition going on, where you have a composition, which I've talked about previously. I've done analysis videos about this composition previously as well. Basically, the idea is that you are trying to get the nano boost as quickly as possible onto your Winston. You use that nano boost to be able to create space for the rest of your team. Use the bubble, obviously, from Hanbin, and then Fearless's own bubble to be able to also help make space. And then at some point, Fearless is going to be able to get Primal Rage, and he's going to be able to go in and make even more space. And the idea is that you just charge your Winston up so that there's nothing the defending team can really do about it. Plus, when you're attacking, you normally get priority and the faster nano boosts up. So let's take a look. I said that Fearless being on Winston was such a key portion for them on Lijiang, and let's see what he does here as well. He was the best Winston in this series, and both Gesture and Marvel tried to play it against him as well. Again, a really nice jump in and engage, synced around the bubbles that he has available, gets purple but hides. He's made so much space for the rest of his team, and now he fully commits once he has the nano boost available. Good bubble usage as well. We all know how good Fearless is. He's essentially just pushed all of the Seoul Dynasty out beyond this archway, and then he's using his Primal Rage to just create chaos, take out creative in the back as well. And while he's getting support from the rest of his team during this time, Gesture's primaling on the point right here. Gesture had the same tools available to him originally, the Nano Boost and the Primal Rage, but his team is all stuck out of the archway. There's nothing that they can do to support him, whereas Fearless can return to his team at any point because they're playing around the objective. He's created space for the rest of his team. And Fearless gets a huge pick in his Primal by taking out creative, and they end up winning this fight based off the back of that. And any time the Dallas Fuel is able to play these compositions where they can get Fearless on his best role, they're going to look spectacular. All right, so let's watch this clip play out a little bit, and then I want to describe kind of what went wrong for them. Because even though this looked like a decent style for them. At the end of the day, they managed to complete King's Row with 0 seconds left. So it comes down to the Seoul Dynasty just being it, or rather, I think they actually went into overtime, but they weren't able to capture point A. And so it came down to a really close final portion where the Seoul Dynasty go back to running what I would consider to be kind of the meta comp when it comes to these APAC teams during this patch. And again, Profit went beast mode. And one of the big things in this series that I noticed was that whenever Profit was playing into Jexa and Repel or Jexa and Fielder on Brig and Zen, Profit was pounding. He was getting so much work done. He was able to push out Sparkle, win the 1v1s, and then destroy the backline almost single-handedly. But when they had backlines that were more like the Lucio and the Moira, it became impossible for Profit to have that kind of impact in the match anymore. And then Fearless is the real key player that's on the server. So let's take a look at what Profit did here, basically. And this is why, or this is part of the reason why the Fuel had so little success running this comp. I mean, gets in onto Sparkle there, manages to push him out the fight, just working with the rest of his team to demech. Hanbin comes around, Pulse Bomb onto Fearless as well to push him out the fight. Little bit of a fight reset here as Gesture dies. But now, as Sparkle is on the point, Discord, oh, not a Discord Orb even actually, Profit just comes in, destroys him, Discord Orb onto Repel, and he manages to blink past Jexa and get that kill. And then he just comes back in to help destroy Jexa and finish off the entire thing. Profit was just utterly dominant when he was on the Tracer against these kind of compositions. So it became very, very hard, actually, for Dallas Fuel to play backline comps where Repel or Fielder were on Zen, because Profit just does way too much. And now we see Gibraltar, which was the most interesting, perhaps, of the maps for Dallas, because it was a totally different composition that they're running here. This is much more similar to the double bubble that they ran on Hello, Brain, work on King's Row. But they're running it on defense, and defense is where they had their success. They actually full held the Seoul Dynasty when it came to point A, which surprised me a lot because I thought that the combination of Gesture and then Profit on the Echo and Creative being able to build up the Nano Boost really quickly would actually lead to a successful push for Seoul. They've looked good at this comp when they've run it in the past. And even though you have Fearless on the Winston, which is a win condition for you, I expected the Fuel to be doing most when they were on attack. Instead, this is how it played out. We've got a defensive composition here, remember? The Fuel are on the defense, and they've let the Seoul Dynasty take server room. So the Seoul Dynasty have come in and taken server room, and they have their players positioned over here. Normally, what you're going to have is your backline positioned in this kind of area, and you're going to want to kind of be ping-ponging tanks onto the payload and looking for an opportunity to continue to push things out. And what the Dallas Fuel do is that, first of all, they've built up their Nano Boost more quickly because Fearless is so good at being able to position himself to take damage while stay alive. He's just expert level at doing that. And as they go for this next push, what I want you to watch is how Fearless engages through the door with Sparkle and Doha, and the rest of the team, that's Hanbin, Jexa, and Repel, push up this little staircase here. And what that does is the Seoul Dynasty's backline starts to back off, and then they just get pinched by the Brig and the Zarya who are pushing through this other area. And this, to me, whilst it's not the craziest of plays, indicates something really different that we didn't see from the Dallas Fuel when they were playing against the Dragons. It's a set play that is predictive of what the opposing team is going to do. You're pushing Fearless in here, but you know that the defending team is going to back off, and so therefore you're pinching them. This is the kind of proactive set play that Dallas were not doing any of when they played against the Dragons. Now, part of the reason for that, remember, is that the Dragons always control the tempo of the game because they are in your face, applying pressure. Seoul Dynasty were much slower in this series, and anytime you play slowly against the Fuel, they're going to have much more space to set up these kind of things. So I think Seoul fucked up in that aspect. But anyway, let's take a look at how this team fight actually happens now that I've told you what's going on. So, Repel has the Nano available. Fearless is going to engage. He's not going to get a primal during this, but his aim is to drive people back. And as he does, you can see that Sparkle and Doha come in through the door with him. And at the same time, Jexa, Repel, and Hanbin walk up the staircase. And they're able to get a lovely pinch with Profit getting taken out almost immediately. Fitz slept behind as well, which is a sick play coming out from Repel. And the rest of the team just gets crunched in this tiny area. They have no space to be able to work in. The other thing I want to note in this team fight too is that Creative, I want to say, wasted the Nana Boost on 2U to try and keep their Zarya alive, keep them on very high charge, and outlast the team fight. The problem is they're positionally at such a disadvantage that the Nana Boost essentially just gets wasted here. And what this means for the next fight is that they don't have this really important tool for the double bubble composition. The Nano is arguably the most important part of attacking with this comp, because otherwise Gesture can't engage on his own. He can engage just with the Primal, but he's not going to have anywhere near the same amount of long-standing resistance in the fight, and this really bites them in the next couple of team fights. So not only is this a great play from the Fuel, but it's a bit of a misstep, I think, from the Seoul Dynasty, thinking that they're, I don't know, as good as the Dragons at being able to outlast team fights without realizing they haven't put in the work to be able to hold a good map position. They had poor positioning, and when you have poor positioning, you can't waste your ultimates to try and stay alive in a fight. So this is the next team fight, basically like 50 seconds down the road. The Dynasty have been really slow to set up the next team fight, and Hanbin's already got in a position up top here, and this Grav Bionade basically just mops the floor with them. Really nice Bionade coming out from Repel here, who generally speaking I would have expected Fielder to be fielded most often, but Repel actually played very nicely here on Gibraltar and deserves a lot of credit for that. So Creative has now only just built up to 50% of a Nana Boost now with a minute left on the clock. And in this fight, they have the EMP to be able to deal with as well. And again, what I love about the Fuel is they're being proactive. They're not sitting back. They're not allowing the Seoul Dynasty to dictate the pace and the tempo. They are going in and they are forcing mistakes out of Seoul. So they catch them right here. 4-man EMP is absolutely lovely. And then they manage to take out Prophet immediately, and Fearless's Primal Rage outlasts the counter EMP that comes out from Fitz, essentially, here. And Fearless just does so much work disrupting this team fight. Gesture gets taken out. Fearless is knocking players all over. There's no way that the Seoul Dynasty can set up a coherent fight. The Grav gets wasted again here. Fitz uses EMP as well when they're down 2. And this fight gets extremely scrappy to the point where Creative uses another Nano Boost on 2U to try and keep him alive. It nearly works as well, except Hanbin gets pocketed and Creative dies. So the Zarya diff comes through. Even though 2U was Nano Boosted, the heals are obviously more important during the course of that team fight. And now I want to just wind things backwards because the stream lagged at this final team fight that happens with like 2.3 seconds left on the clock. So I have to kind of be precise with what I'm doing here. All right, so this is now the final fight for the Seoul Dynasty as they're attacking. Duplicate is available. EMP is not because they used that in the previous fight. Nanoboost is not because they used that in the previous fight. What else? They used Grav in the previous fight as well, and now they've had to switch over to the Diva, so clearly they don't have that ultimate available. So really, they have extremely limited tools to be able to convert here. Whereas when we look on the other side, we've got a Nano available, we've got the EMP, we've got the Grav. The Fuel have done just such a great job of rotating their ultimates, and the reason for that is because they're always being the proactive team. They can decide what ultimates they want to invest in the fight because they're not throwing them out willy-nilly, reacting to what the Seoul Dynasty are doing. And this difference in tempo is such a wild difference to when they were playing against the Dragons, and it's absolutely something that teams could exploit when they play against the Dynasty. Anyway, how does this team fight go down? What I want to watch, really, and you have to be careful to like really zone in to catch it because the stream was lagging at this period of time, but Repel uses the Nano Boost on Fearless, and Fearless basically one-shot kills Creative right at the start of this team fight. Again, Fearless's Winston being just a freakishly good asset for the Dallas Fuel to rely on in these team fights. So even though Prophet engages, I want to, the stream kind of skipped forward here, but you can piece it together by what you see in the kill feed. Repel, Nano Boosted Fearless, Fearless kills Creative at the back, and this is just a massive heal difference on top of the ult differences. Doesn't even matter that Doha's dead, and the Grav is going to be able to clean things up, as you can see here. When Hanbin eventually invests it in the team fight, it catches both Prophet and Gesture, and they pretty easily added the Bionade in there, and they're able to clean this one up. So although it gets somewhat close, you could say, this is again just a pretty much a masterclass performance from the Fuel. Every single team fight they were in control of, they set the tempo, and they won with superior ult rotations and superior controlling of the pace. A great map of Gibraltar. So it's still pretty close at the end of the day because they still then had to push, and their push ended up coming down to the final 30 seconds. But like I said, they'd essentially set up the win conditions for themselves on the defense. Now I want to take a look at Oasis, which was the final map of the series. And the things I want to highlight are that what we've got here is a Moira Lucio backline, which Prophet, if he was playing the Tracer, would be struggling to deal with. And we've got the Sombra and the McCree. So the most comfort heroes of comfort heroes for at least 2/3 of their team. Like, all of these players are on the most comfort heroes possible. You could argue that Hanbin's comfort hero is Sigma and Repel's is, I don't know, maybe the Ana or something like that. But at least for these four, these are absolutely the heroes that they would want to play with at all times. What does this composition do? Even though you would think that the backline is kind of trending towards the same fast-paced tempo that they ran previously, obviously with the McCree in here, it's much slower paced generally. So they want the team fights to drag out. Whereas on the other side, we've got a very fast rush composition, though the Mei and the Reaper have not been in vogue for quite a while. But I think this was directly because they realized that Fearless was a bit of a problem, because Prophet also ran the Reaper later on in this map as well. But take a look at how this team fight goes down, and I want you to pay attention to Jexit as well, because even though they lose Exi at the beginning of this fight, and they really should have a massive advantage, the wall is all over the place, the players are all over the place from the Dynasty, and take a look at Jexit here, who is this little frogman attached to the wall. He gets into this position, scoots around the wall, and he's about to boop what he is attempting to say as 3 players into the pit. Now, I think Fitz dodges it, but both Prophet and Tuyu get booped down into the pit here. Animo barely dodges it, Fitz barely dodges it, and they now have 2 players in the pit, including the off-tank, who can no longer support Marvel, who's disconnected from the rest of his team, and they get crushed. That single play from Jexir wins them this first team fight. A beautiful boop coming out from the Lucio that's just absolutely game-changing. So yeah, they managed to find the pick onto Marvel. They take out these players, and Seoul Dynasty look uncoordinated and undisciplined with the rush composition, and Jexir hits them with a fat individual play. By the way, in the middle of all of this, Exi gets a flash kill onto... Exi just farms towards the end of this fight, and it's the next fight where he gets some wonderful flash kills too. So let's take a look. The Seoul Dynasty changed things up a little bit here in the next team fight. They run the... they basically go back to running the fast dive composition, which was in meta towards the beginning of the playoffs in 2020. The difference maker here being that they try and keep Tuyu on Zarya because he has some charge on his ultimate. This, I think, is the wrong decision. This is one of those scenarios where you're prioritizing the ultimate instead of the role that he should actually be on. If Tuyu's on D.Va here, he can actually have effect in the dive. He can shut down Exi if he wants to. But most of all, the most important thing is the tempo and not leaving Azaria just around in the team fight to get picked off by Exi and hacked by Doha and these kind of things. You really want the entire composition to be working as one unit. Anyway, that's not the thing that really cripples them. Well, actually, it kind of is at the end of the day. Let's take a look at what they do here, though. Dallas Fuel, again, taking the initiative with the Coalescence, trying to play aggressively into them. They're not overstaying their welcome. They're just pushing them and seeing if they can get the Seoul Dynasty to make a mistake, and then backing out. They back out as well because they've been back-capped, and they have to retreat back to the point. At this point, Tuyu has his Graviton available and goes for a Grav. Hanbin does not eat the Grav, but instead bombs defensively onto the Grav. And though Tuyu bubbles, you can see the bubble down here just behind my big fat head. Though Tuyu bubbles, Doha comes in just perfectly with this EMP, perfectly timed. I know that the screen is just a mess of compressed pixels right now, but if we wind it back a little bit, if we wind it back 10 seconds and give you guys time to really process what went on here, you'll be able to see that as they go aggressive with the Coalescence, they back off, and look at that. That D.Va bomb with the EMP just to completely rinse Tuyu. And now Tuyu really does need to be on D.Va. In the next team fight, where Tuyu has swapped to D.Va, the whole point of the Seoul Dynasty's composition is to go aggressive. they want to be trying to burst down one of these players. They either want to try and get a hack on one of the tanks and burst them down. Alternatively, a hack onto Jexi or Repel is really high value too. Or they can just try for the hardcore dive onto Exi because he's the most vulnerable target. But the tempo has to go up. The faster you make the team fight, the less likely it is that Exi can turn it in his favor, and the more your Tracer is going to be able to outvalue the McCree. Unfortunately, though, what happens is Fearless, again, steps up like an absolute Chad and just primals them to pieces. They can't do anything against this. Right as the Seoul Dynasty pops their beat to actually try and engage, Fearless uses his primal and just disrupts any attempt that they had at trying to set up a coherent dive. Exi backs off properly, resets himself very passively because he knows he's the target, and perfectly finds Animo just after the beat drops off. And at this point, Seoul Dynasty have used all of their cooldowns to try and get in the fight, and they all got disrupted by Fearless. So this combination of Fearless playing to disrupt so that his team can slow down the tempo of the fight favors Exi massively, and is going to be a big win condition for the Dallas Fuel over the course of the season, in my opinion, because Fearless and Exi are their two star players. I know that people are going to be molding it like, whoa, Sparkle's their star player, but at the end of the day, the actual metas that are most likely to be happening on a day-to-day basis, I think you're going to be relying on Fearless and Exi more than you're relying on Sparkle. Sparkle's more the kind of player that's going to come in for one key meta on a hero and pound on it. And then the rest of the time is going to be kind of filling the gaps. That's how I would expect it to go down anyway. Of course, we have no idea what metas are going to be prevalent. All right, this is the final round. This is Gardens, and we start out with the Seoul Dynasty running a high-tempo team composition, except for the Reaper, which I'm going to put a question mark over at the moment. And this Reaper, I think it's a bit of a weird pick. I think the Tracer would be the normal pick, but I think the explanation is that Prophet has not really been able to get any value playing the Tracer into this backline of Jexa and Repel when they're playing the Moira Lucio. It's just too hard to solo kill. There's no way that he's having the same value as when he was playing against the like Zen Brig, for example. And they really want to shut down Fearless. They want to try and take this guy out of the fight. So I can understand the theme of it here, but what really ends up happening is that they're all over the place with their focus fire. It seems like the composition would be designed to try and take down Fearless, but they don't go for Fearless in these fights. Instead, they prioritize Jexir for some reason, and then in some of the fights, they prioritize Exi when he moves over to Tracer, which I find to be extremely weird. So let's have a look at the first fight. The focus fire for the Seoul Dynasty here is really all over the place. The way that this composition is designed, you want to be trying to prioritize a lot of pressure onto the tanks, try and take them out with hacks early on. And instead, a lot of damage done to Jexa here. Seems like Fitz wants to try and get onto Jexa. Then he's going to try and hack Exi, which again makes no sense. I don't know what the shot calling looks like at the moment here for the Seoul Dynasty, but it doesn't seem to make sense. Perhaps if there was a Tracer, they would be a little more synced up, but maybe that's just wishful thinking. It seems like there's a more fundamental problem here with the Seoul Dynasty when they run these all-in dive kind of comps. So Jexa actually is the one to take out Prophet. Jexa as well deserves a lot of credit in the whole of this map for being a real high value player. He's just bopping around, doing his thing, weaving in and out, doing a huge amount of damage, finding targets, isolating targets, getting boop kills like that one onto 2U, and throughout it all surviving. The guy's playing like a freak. So what I want to go through here is real quick. I want to kind of wind it back 10 seconds and talk you through what happens after this original team fight. So because this team fight goes so well for the Dallas Fuel, they end up winning the next team fight basically just based off ultimates. They use Jex. Actually, I'm going to draw this in blue. They use Jex's beat. They use Fearless's primal. They use the coalescence, and they use the EMP. They use 4 ultimates to be able to win the next team fight and take them up to 99%. So the Dallas Fuel just kind of use the momentum based off the back of having a good first fight. They're miles ahead of they're 40% ahead in terms of the sound barrier. They end up ahead when it comes to the coalescence as well. They're 30% ahead when it comes to the primal rage. Like, they have this massive advantage to be able to work with, and they do in the next team fight. Seoul then manages to retain their ultimates, so they keep hold of the EMP. I think they keep hold of Primal and Beat or something like that, and they're able to recap despite the fact that it becomes a really scrappy fight where Animo's picked off first by Xy's Deadeye, and they like barely manage to retake. But at the end of the day, we get to a situation where we're 99 to 70, and this is where I want to clock back in, because you can see that these ultimates that they used 2 team fights ago are starting to come back online. They're getting ready for double support ult and the EMP, whereas on the other side, Fitz used EMP in the previous fight. Hanamura died in the previous fight, so I don't think he was actually able to regenerate. No, actually, this might be his second soundbar. I can't remember. Anyway, the key thing to look at, though, is that there's an EMP difference here, and both teams are going to have soundbar, and both teams are going to have coalescence at some point during the team fight. So what we want to take a look at is that the way this ends up playing out is that because Jex is forced to use his beat to engage, Seoul have a beat advantage. Right, Doha gets hacked. They use the beat. They use the beat to actually engage. Marvel uses his primal to try and disrupt the beat engage, similarly to what Fearless was doing earlier on University. And in theory here, this should give Seoul Dynasty a pretty nice advantage. The Fuel can't actually make use of this beat, and they can't EMP because Doha's hacked. And so these double tank ultimates are going to essentially disrupt them and buy time for Animo to rebeat, and they should have somewhat of an advantage unless Doha lands a sicko EMP. But what ends up going on really is that after the EMP is used from Doha and the beat comes out from Animo, right? So at this point in the fight, Dynasty have a massive advantage. They have huge health advantage. Their players have been EMP'd, but they already had like Primal and the Cole's about to come online, so they're all set up to succeed. As long as they focus the right targets here, the Seoul Dynasty should be in a good position. And the targets to try and focus are, in my opinion, trying to get hacks and pressure Fearless, trying to get hacks and pressure Hanbin, or maybe, if Fitz lands something nutty, taking out one of the supports. But generally speaking, you want to be trying to burst the tanks. In my opinion, at least that's how I've seen other teams have success with it in the past, because Prophet's playing the Reaper. And instead, what we get is this horribly scrappy team fight where Marvel's trying to retain presence on the point and knock around the Fuel, and the rest of the Seoul Dynasty try and kill Jexir and then try and get a hack kill onto Exy instead. And you could say, oh, well, it's, you know, the Hanbin self-destruct is zoning them away or something like that. But they have a lot of space to be able to work with here, even after that comes out. And the focus fire seems extremely poor. Marvel overextends and gives his life. There's no coordination with that Winston as to trying to find a pick. They take out Exy, but that's such a low value pick. And Fearless just stays alive throughout all of this. He's able to build up another Primal as well. And Prophet is just slowly getting chunked out because they're not using the beat to take presence over the point. They stay in a tiny little corner, bunched up, trying to kill a Tracer that's harassing their back and trying to kill Jexir, who's flying around on the walls. Fearless's Primal now comes out, destroys Creative, and in this more scrappy, longer team fight, Fearless just does way too much work along with Exy. And Prophet can't do anything when the fight is this scrappy because the mobility just makes all the difference. So I was disappointed with how the Seoul Dynasty played this final map, but I also thought that generally speaking, there's a lot of great things for the Dynasty fans to, for the Dallas Fuel fans to take away from this series. Your team looks good with Fearless on Winston. Your team looks good when they can play fast-paced, high, or rather rush compositions where they're all coordinated. And your team is starting to develop synergy with slower pace compositions where Fearless is using his either Nano Boosts or Primal Rages to slow down the team fight and have Exy have impact overall. So in stark contrast to that series against the Dragons, we saw a lot of silver linings in this series. I mean, I say silver linings, they won the series, so I suppose it's not even a cloud, is it? The metaphor doesn't work. So yeah, a really interesting and good series for the Dallas Fuel that showcased their strengths and some of Seoul Dynasty's weaknesses as well. And the other thing to note coming out of this as well is that because you have this like cycle where dragons beat the fuel, but fuel beat the dynasty, but dynasty beat the dragons, you have this like, what do they call it in Overwatch? The circle of suck. What these things actually mean is that different team styles match up well against each other. That's the key thing to take away, right? As well, is that the fuel played best against the Seoul Dynasty because they could play. They were the ones that were always in charge of the tempo, whether they wanted to play fast or slow, because the Dynasty aren't as proactive a team as the Dragons. The Dynasty played really well into the Dragons because the Dynasty have a slower, more reactive style that was able to deal very well with what Lip was trying to do. They were always shutting down that win condition for the Dragons, trying to play to counter their opponents rather than set up their own strengths, although Prophet was also just a nut in that series. And the Dragons were playing really well into the Fuel, because the Fuel want to slow down the team fights when they're playing Exio McCree, and the Dragons will constantly apply pressure to you so that you are never in control of the tempo. These kind of stylistic changes and matchups influence a lot of how these matches end up going down. So I hope this was interesting anyway. The grand finals with the Shanghai Dragons taking on the Seoul Dynasty are happening tomorrow as of recording this video, but it'll be today when I release this. So definitely check them out. Go and take a look at Avril's stream. He just cracked 2K viewers on his previous companion stream. Guy's popping off, and he's a lot of fun to listen to when I'm watching these back as well. So again, big ups to Avril for doing this. And it's just making me more hyped for the season, man. It's a lot of fun. I'll catch you around next time.